I never thought my life would turn into a full-blown drama, but here we are. My name is Sienna, and until a few days ago, I thought I had my future figured out. I had a solid relationship, a decent job, and a plan to move in with my boyfriend, Jordan, once his lease was up. Then my parents decided to throw all of that into chaos. It started at our usual Sunday dinner. My mom was in the kitchen, stretching a single pot roast into an entire week's worth of meals, like she always did. My dad was glued to the TV, barely reacting to the football game he was supposedly watching. My younger sister, Elena, was sprawled across the couch, texting away. It was all perfectly normal until I noticed the extra place settings at the table. "Who else is coming?" I asked, grabbing a bowl to help with the salad. Mom gave me a sweet but calculated smile. "Wesley and Liam." My stomach did a little flip. Wesley was my dad's best friend since high school, practically his business partner at this point. I barely knew his son, Liam, just that he worked with them and was a few years older than me. Something about this felt off. Dinner started out normally enough. Wesley arrived with Liam, who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. Mom kept piling food onto his plate while throwing me weird, meaningful glances. Elena kept nudging my foot under the table like she knew something I didn't. Then, right between the pot roast and dessert, Dad cleared his throat. "Sienna, your mother and I have been talking with Wesley," he started, in his usual business-like tone. That sentence alone sent warning bells blaring in my head. "Liam is ready to settle down," Dad continued, as if he were announcing a new investment deal. "And we think this would be a great opportunity for both families." I nearly choked on my water. "Wait, what?" Mom leaned forward, smiling like she was sharing the best news ever. "You two would be a perfect match. Think about it, sweetheart. Two good families, strong values, and he's got a stable career." I turned to Liam, expecting him to protest, but he just stared down at his plate like it was the most fascinating thing in the world. I let out a sharp laugh. "I'm dating Jordan." Mom waved a dismissive hand. "That's just a phase, honey." "A phase?" Jordan and I had been together for 2 years. Dad exhaled heavily, like I was being ridiculous. "Liam has a real future, Sienna. He's going to take over Wesley's share of the business one day. This isn't just about you, it's about family." That's when it hit me. This had nothing to do with me. I wasn't their daughter in this situation. I was a business asset they were trying to merge. I pushed my plate away. My appetite was gone. "I'm not marrying Liam." Dad's jaw tightened. "You have until the end of the month to break things off with Jordan. We'll be announcing your engagement at Wesley's birthday party." My heart pounded. "You're joking." He wasn't. I grabbed my bag and walked out. Jordan was already waiting in his car around the corner. We had planned to go shopping after dinner, just a normal, boring night. Instead, I got into the car, hands shaking. "What happened?" he asked immediately. I let out a sharp breath. "They're trying to marry me off." His brow furrowed. "What?" I stared straight ahead, my mind spinning. My dad's best friend's son. Some kind of business merger disguised as a wedding. Jordan swore under his breath. "You're serious?" I nodded. "That was yesterday. Today, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. Mom has left a dozen messages, all variations of guilt-tripping and emotional blackmail. Elena sent me a string of WTF texts, followed by a warning Dad was serious. Even my cousin Amelia called, wanting to know if it was true. Jordan and I stayed up late last night trying to figure out what to do. We had already planned to move in together next month, just a small 2-bedroom near his friend Mark. We'd been saving up quietly, hoping to avoid drama, but now it looked like we'd have to speed things up. I've muted most of my family's numbers, but I can still see the notifications piling up. The only one I responded to was Elena, swearing her to secrecy that I was staying with Jordan tonight. I don't know what to do next. I love my family, but this is insane. It's 2024, not the 1800s. Who even arranges marriages like this anymore? And for a business deal, no less? Jordan keeps telling me it's my choice, but one thing is clear. I'm not marrying Liam. And if my dad thinks I'm just going to sit back and let this happen, he's in for a surprise. The day after that disastrous dinner, I waited until my parents were at work and went home to grab some essentials. I figured I'd be in and out, but of course, nothing ever goes as planned. Elena was home, sprawled on the couch in her pajamas, recovering from a cold. She barely glanced up from her phone when I walked in, but when she saw me heading for my room with an empty duffel bag, she sat up fast. "So, you're really doing this?" she asked, lowering her voice. I yanked open my dresser drawers, grabbing jeans and stuffing them into my bag. "What choice do I have?" Elena chewed her lip. "You could, I don't know, pretend for a while? Give Dad time to cool down?" I snorted. "And what happens when the engagement party rolls around? When they expect me to wear a dress and smile while they plan my entire life for me?" She sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. I don't know how this is going to end, Sienna. Dad's serious. He's been talking about this for months." That made me freeze. Months? She winced like she hadn't meant to say that. Yeah, Mom, too. They were waiting for the right time to bring it up. A sick feeling curled in my stomach. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment idea they cooked up over dinner. They'd been planning this, setting it up behind my back. I zipped my bag and turned to face her. "Elena, is there something else I don't know?" She hesitated, her fingers tapping against her phone. "It's about the business." Of course it was. She shifted uncomfortably. "Wesley's company isn't doing great. Dad's been stressed about money, and apparently combining the businesses would fix everything. That's why they're pushing so hard." I let out a humorless laugh. "So I'm not just a daughter, I'm a human bailout plan." Elena looked guilty, but didn't argue. I slung my bag over my shoulder. "I have to go." She stood up. "Where are you even staying?" "With Jordan." She nodded slowly. "I won't tell them." I believed her. Despite everything, Elena wasn't the enemy here. Before I left, I checked my phone. 17 missed calls, half from Mom, the rest from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. I turned it off. I needed space to think. Over the next few days, things spiraled faster than I expected. Mom left increasingly frantic voicemails, swinging between begging and guilt-tripping. Dad didn't call, but I knew his silence was worse. Then, Amelia showed up at Jordan's apartment. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking equal parts exhausted and exasperated. "You seriously just ran away?" "I didn't run away," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "I left a situation I had no control over." Amelia plopped onto the couch. "Well, your mom is having a breakdown. Your dad's furious. And the entire family is buzzing about how you're throwing your life away for some guy." Jordan, who had been quietly listening from the kitchen, finally spoke. "I'm not some guy." Amelia held up her hands. "Hey, I don't believe it either. But you know how our family is." I sank onto the armrest of the couch. "They're acting like I committed a crime." Amelia gave me a look. "To them, you did." I groaned, rubbing my temples. "So what now? Do they plan to lock me in my room until I agree?" She exhaled. "It's worse than that." I glanced up. "What do you mean?" "They already booked a venue for the engagement party." I stared at her. "You're joking." She shook her head. "They put down a non-refundable deposit. Mom's been showing the contract to everyone as proof that you can't back out now." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. "Oh, so now I'm legally obligated to marry Liam?" Amelia grimaced. "It's not just about the venue. They're serious about this whole merging the families thing. They think you'll come around." I clenched my fists. "They don't care what I want. They just care about the business." She didn't argue, because we both knew it was true. That night, Jordan and I sat in his tiny apartment, eating cheap takeout and trying to figure out our next move. "I don't think they're going to stop," I admitted, pushing a piece of rice around my plate. Jordan sighed, leaning back against the couch. "Then maybe we need to stop waiting for them to change their minds." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then said carefully, "What if we move forward on our own terms?" I blinked. "Like what?" He shrugged. "We were already planning to move in together next month. What if we just speed that up?" I chewed my lip. "You mean, get our own place now?" Jordan nodded. "And maybe," he hesitated, "make it official." My breath caught. "Are you saying we should get married?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "I mean, it's already where we were headed, right? And if we're married, they can't force you into anything else." I stared at him, my heart pounding. The idea was crazy, rushed, but at the same time, it made sense. I swallowed hard. "You really want to marry me?" He gave me a small, lopsided smile. "Yeah, Sienna, I do." Something warm spread through my chest. I didn't need my family's approval. I didn't need their permission. I just needed Jordan. I took a deep breath. "Okay." His eyes widened slightly. Yeah. I exhaled. "Let's do it." His grin was slow but certain. All right then. And just like that, our future was in our hands. For the first time in days, I felt free. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of Jordan moving around the apartment. The air was thick with the scent of cheap instant coffee and slightly burnt toast. I rubbed my eyes and sat up on the couch, stretching the stiffness out of my back. "Morning," Jordan said, glancing over from the tiny kitchen counter. "You sleep okay?" I gave him a tired smile. "As good as I can when my entire family is probably plotting my downfall." He smirked. "Well, at least you're safe in our little fortress." I let out a dry laugh. His studio apartment was barely big enough for one person, let alone two, and calling it a fortress was generous. The place was cramped, the walls thin enough to hear his neighbor's terrible taste in reality TV, and the only closet was already overflowing. But somehow, none of that mattered. For the first time in days, I wasn't drowning under the weight of my parents' expectations. Jordan sat beside me, placing a coffee cup in my hands. "So, are we really doing this?" I took a sip, letting the warmth wake me up. "Getting married?" He nodded. "Yeah. If we're serious, we should start figuring out the logistics." I swallowed. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. We need to keep it quiet for now. If my parents find out before it's done, they'll do everything in their power to stop us. Jordan agreed. Courthouse wedding then. No big event, no drama. Just us. It was a simple plan, but I knew that with my family, nothing would stay simple for long. Over the next few days, we kept our heads down and focused on getting things in order. Jordan managed to swap shifts at work, so he'd have a free morning for the courthouse. I started looking into the paperwork we'd need. It felt surreal, like we were racing against an invisible clock. Meanwhile, my phone remained a battlefield. Mom left increasingly emotional voicemails, swinging between guilt and passive-aggressive threats. Dad still refused to call, but I knew he was behind the concerned messages from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. The worst part? They weren't just calling. They were showing up. It started with Amelia dropping by, pretending she just happened to be in the area. She wasn't. She tried to reason with me, saying that Dad was losing sleep, that Mom was crying every night, that I should at least talk to them. I stood my ground. "Amelia, I love you, but this isn't about them losing sleep. This is about them trying to control my life," she sighed. "I just don't want you to regret this." I met her gaze, steady and sure. "I won't." Then came the unexpected visit from Wesley. Jordan and I were just about to head out when there was a knock at the door. I opened it, expecting maybe the landlord, but instead, there he was, my father's best friend, the man who had been treating me like a business deal. Wesley smiled like this was just a friendly visit. "Sienna, can we talk?" Jordan immediately stepped beside me. His presence was solid, unwavering. I folded my arms. "I don't think we have much to say to each other." Wesley ignored that. "Look, I know things got heated the other night. But your father and I," he sighed, as if this was difficult for him. "We just want what's best for you." I clenched my jaw. "What's best for me? Or what's best for your failing business?" His expression tightened, just for a second, before he forced another smile. "You're making a mistake, running off with Jordan. Your family can give you a stable future, a good life." Jordan let out a dry laugh. "And what exactly does that good life look like? Being forced into a marriage I don't want." Wesley's eyes flickered toward him, then back to me. "Marriage is about more than love, Sienna. It's about partnership, family, security." I shook my head. "No. Marriage is about choosing the person you want to build a life with. And I've already made my choice." For the first time, the fake politeness dropped from his face. "Your father won't forgive this." I met his stare head on. That's his problem. With that, I shut the door in his face. The night before our courthouse wedding, Jordan and I lay on the floor of his apartment, staring at the ceiling. "You nervous?" he asked. I turned my head to look at him. "A little. Not about marrying you, just about what happens after." He reached over, lacing his fingers with mine. "No matter what happens, we'll figure it out." And I believed him. The next morning, I put on a simple white dress. I ordered online, and Jordan wore his best button down. We were ready, or so we thought. As we stepped outside, my stomach dropped. Standing by Jordan's car, arms crossed, was my father. He looked tired, not angry, not shouting, just tired. "Sienna," he said, voice heavy, "come home." I swallowed hard. "Dad, I don't want to hear it." He cut me off. I don't care about the business, the arrangement, any of it. I can't lose my daughter. I blinked. But you were willing to force me into a marriage I didn't want. He ran a hand down his face. I was wrong. I see that now. But you shutting us out like this, it's killing your mother. It's killing me. I hesitated. For all the anger I held toward my parents, a part of me still loved them. A part of me wanted to believe him. Jordan, sensing my hesitation, squeezed my hand. He didn't say anything he didn't have to. He was letting me decide. I exhaled. Dad, I love you, but I need to live my life on my own terms. If you can accept that, we can find a way forward. But if not, I trailed off, letting the weight of my words settle between us. Dad's face was unreadable. Then, finally, he nodded. I just want you to be happy. For the first time in weeks, I felt like we understood each other. We didn't go to the courthouse that day, not because we changed our minds, but because, for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running. We had time. And this time, the decision was truly ours. I didn't expect my father to back down so easily. A part of me kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to change his mind and go back to demanding I marry Liam. But he didn't. After that confrontation, things got quiet. No more angry calls from my mother. No more guilt-laden texts from extended family. Even Elena stopped sending her worried check-ins. It was eerie, like the calm before a storm. Jordan and I kept moving forward. We put the courthouse wedding on hold, not because we had doubts, but because, for the first time, we weren't making decisions out of panic. We wanted to do this the right way, for us. That didn't mean things were easy. Jordan's lease was ending in 2 weeks, and despite spending hours scrolling through apartment listings, we hadn't found a place. Everything decent was out of our budget, and the few affordable options were either in rough neighborhoods or required a long list of documents we didn't have. One night, as we sat on the floor eating takeout, Jordan sighed. We might have to take Andre up on his offer. Andre, his best friend, had a spare room, technically, more of a storage space in the converted garage his parents let him live in. The idea of crashing there felt like defeat, but we were running out of time. I groaned, setting my carton of rice down. Living in someone's garage doesn't exactly scream new beginnings. Jordan smirked. What? You don't want to live in a place where his mom still folds his laundry? I laughed, but the weight of our situation lingered. We were stuck. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, my hours at work got cut. I was in the middle of trying to find a second job when there was a knock at Jordan's door. I assumed it was the landlord or maybe Andre dropping by, but when I opened it, I froze. Liam. He looked just as surprised to see me. Sienna. I crossed my arms. What are you doing here? He exhaled. I needed to talk to you. I hesitated, but stepped aside. Jordan wasn't home, and I figured if Liam had anything to say, I'd rather hear it now than deal with the suspense later. He walked in, looking uncomfortable as he sat on the couch. Listen, he started, rubbing his hands together. I didn't know my dad and yours were planning all of this. I swear. I studied him, trying to gauge his sincerity. You just went along with it? He let out a bitter chuckle. What was I supposed to do? My dad's been breathing down my neck about responsibility for years, and when they told me about the marriage plan, it was already set in motion. I narrowed my eyes. You could have said no. Liam shook his head. Not in my family. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. That's actually why I came. I need to tell you something. I stiffened. What? He hesitated. Your dad. He's in trouble. Financially. I let out a dry laugh. Yeah, I figured that out when they tried to sell me off like a business deal. Liam shook his head. It's worse than that. My dad's company is sinking. Fast. And your dad, he's tied to it more than you know. If something doesn't change soon, he's gonna lose everything. My stomach twisted. I knew my dad was struggling, but I hadn't realized just how bad it was. Liam ran a hand through his hair. I didn't want to be dragged into this either. I have my own life, my own complications. I raised an eyebrow. Complications? He sighed. I have a girlfriend. We've been together for over a year. She has a kid. I blinked. That was unexpected. Liam let out a humorless laugh. Yeah, you can imagine how thrilled my dad would be if he knew. I stared at him. So we were both pawns. He nodded. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked, why are you telling me this now? Liam looked me in the eye. because I think my dad is about to make things worse. And I thought you should know before it's too late. The next day, I got a call from Elena. Dad's losing it, she whispered, like she was afraid someone would hear. Mom's been crying nonstop, and he's talking about selling the house. My stomach dropped. What? She exhaled shakily. I overheard him on the phone with a lawyer. He's considering selling to cover his debts. I don't think Mom even knows yet. I gripped my phone tighter. And what about Wesley? He's trying to push Dad into some last-minute deal, but I don't know the details. I ran a hand through my hair. This was spiraling fast. When Jordan got home, I told him everything. He leaned against the counter, processing. So what do we do? I exhaled. I don't know, but I can't just sit back and watch my family implode. Jordan studied me. You're not thinking of going back, are you? I met his gaze. No. But I am thinking about making sure my father doesn't ruin his entire life over a bad decision. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my father. He didn't pick up at first. I tried again. On the third call, he finally answered. What do you want, Sienna? His voice was cold. I took a deep breath. Dad, I know about the money problems. Silence. I know you're thinking about selling the house. I know Wesley is pushing you into something. And I know that forcing me into marriage was your way of trying to fix everything. He exhaled sharply. You don't understand, I do, I interrupted. And that's why I'm calling. You don't have to do this. Dad let out a bitter laugh. And what do you suggest? Let everything fall apart? I hesitated. Liam told me what's going on. Wesley's drowning, and he's pulling you down with him. If you keep letting him make decisions for you, you're going to lose everything. Dad didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. I don't know what else to do. I softened. Walk away from Wesley. Cut ties before it's too late. You don't owe him your entire future. Another long pause. Then, for the first time in weeks, I heard something in his voice that I hadn't before. Doubt. I didn't know if he would listen. I didn't know if anything I said would change what was coming. But for the first time, my father wasn't just pushing me away. He was actually listening. And that was a start. For the next few days, I waited for the fallout. I had no idea if my father would take my advice or if he'd dig his heels in deeper. I didn't expect him to suddenly be okay with my choices, but I hoped maybe for the first time that he would at least consider stepping away from Wesley before it was too late. In the meantime, Jordan and I were still dealing with our own mess. His lease was down to its final days, and our apartment search had gone from frustrating to downright bleak. Every decent place was either taken before we could apply or required credit scores we didn't have. One night, while scrolling through listings, Jordan let out a heavy sigh. We might not have a choice. I looked up from my phone. About what? He gave me a sheepish smile. Andre's garage. I groaned. God, I was really hoping to avoid that. Yeah, me too, he admitted. But unless we find something in the next few days, we don't have many options. I sighed, tossing my phone onto the couch. Well, at least it's temporary, Jordan grinned. That's the spirit. I smirked. If his mom starts folding my underwear, though, we're leaving immediately. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Elena. Dad told Wesley he's pulling out. I read the text 3 times before my brain caught up. I sat up so fast I nearly knocked over my coffee. What? Jordan asked, still half asleep beside me. I shoved my phone in his face. He actually did it. Jordan squinted at the screen. Damn. He sat up, rubbing his face. Did she say what happens next? I quickly typed back. What did Wesley say? Elena responded almost immediately. Lost his mind. Yelled at Dad for ruining everything. Dad's pretty shaken up, but he's sticking to it. Mom's freaking out about selling the house. I exhaled. It wasn't a perfect victory, but it was something. At least my father had finally seen the truth. 2 days later, I got a text from my dad. Dinner. Sunday. Just us. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Jordan leaned over my shoulder. You gonna go? I hesitated. I think I have to. So that Sunday, I found myself standing outside my parents' house, nerves twisting in my stomach. It felt strange being back after everything. The last time I was here, they were trying to control my entire future. Now, I wasn't sure what to expect. Mom answered the door, her expression unreadable. She stepped aside, letting me in without a word. Dad was already sitting at the dining table, his face lined with exhaustion. For the first time in my life, He looked older. Elena was there too, sitting quietly at the end of the table. I took a seat, the silence stretching. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. "I assume Elena told you." I nodded. "That you pulled out of the deal with Wesley?" "Yeah," he exhaled, rubbing his temples. "It wasn't easy." I softened slightly. "I know." Mom let out a shaky breath. "The house, we might have to sell." There it was, the consequence of everything. I swallowed. "I'm sorry." And I meant it. For all their faults, this was still the home I grew up in. Dad's voice was gruff. "It is what it is." Silence again. This time, it was Elena who broke it. "You guys are being so dramatic." Mom turned to her, eyes flashing. "Elena, this is serious." She rolled her eyes. "Yeah, it sucks. But at least now we're not basing our entire future on a forced marriage deal. So, silver lining." Dad sighed, but for the first time, I saw the hint of a smile. Finally, he looked at me. "I still don't agree with what you're doing, but I understand why you did it. It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest thing I was going to get. And for now, it was enough." After dinner, I hugged Elena goodbye and stepped outside. To my surprise, Dad followed me out. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "Jordan's a good guy?" I blinked at him. "Yeah, he is." Dad nodded slowly, as if he was still processing that. "All right." He didn't say anything else. But as I walked toward my car, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Maybe we weren't completely okay yet. Maybe we never would be. But for the first time, we were trying. And that was more than I ever expected. A month had passed since that awkward but necessary dinner with my family. Life didn't magically become perfect overnight, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was steering my own ship. Jordan and I had finally found a small, one-bedroom apartment in an older complex. It wasn't fancy, and the layout was weird. The bathroom was right next to the kitchen, which took some getting used to, but it was ours. No more tiptoeing around a studio apartment or considering moving into Andre's glorified storage unit. Unpacking was slow, mostly because we barely owned anything. Our couch was a second-hand find from Facebook Marketplace. Our dining table was 2 mismatched chairs and a fold-up card table, and our bed was still just a mattress on the floor. But we were making it work. One night, as we sat on the floor eating takeout for what felt like the millionth time, Jordan nudged me. "So, are we ever going to actually get married?" I snorted. "You in a rush?" He grinned. "I mean, I already live with you, put up with your weird habit of leaving socks everywhere, and share a single bathroom with you. Might as well make it official." I tossed a piece of rice at him. "Wow, what a romantic proposal." Jordan caught it and popped it into his mouth. "I try." I leaned back against the wall, smiling. "Yeah, we should do it. On our terms this time," he nodded. "No courthouse rush, no running from your parents, just us." The idea felt right. Not reactionary, not desperate, just right. Despite everything that had happened, I wasn't completely cut off from my family. Elena came over often, bringing random groceries. "Mom insists you're not eating enough vegetables." And little by little, Mom had started texting me again. Nothing deep, just casual things, like a picture of my childhood dog sleeping on the porch, or a recipe she thought I'd like. It was her way of reaching out without actually saying she missed me. Dad, on the other hand, was still figuring things out. He hadn't outright invited me back, but according to Elena, he asked about me more often than he let on. One day, I was grabbing groceries when I spotted him at the store. He was in the produce aisle, looking completely lost in front of a pile of avocados. I hesitated for half a second, then walked over. "You should squeeze them to check if they're ripe." He looked up, startled, then huffed. "I know that." I smirked. "Uh-huh. And yet you look like you're trying to solve a math equation." To my surprise, he chuckled. "Your mother always picked them out. Now she's making me learn." I raised an eyebrow. "Guess that means she's finally letting you into the kitchen." He made a face. "Only for supervised tasks." We stood there for a moment, neither of us sure what to say next. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "Your place, it's all right?" I nodded. "It's small, but it works." He hesitated, then muttered, "Good." It wasn't a long conversation. It wasn't emotional or dramatic, but it was something. And for now, that was enough. A few weeks later, Jordan and I stood under a big oak tree in a quiet park, exchanging vows. It was small, just us, Elena, Andre, who smugly declared himself the best man, and Amelia, who showed up with a bottle of champagne and a smug "I told you." So, look, there was no expensive venue, no elaborate decor, No family drama looming over us. Just a handwritten promise between two people who chose each other. No strings attached. Afterward, we celebrated at a tiny diner down the street, splitting a burger and fries because wedding budgets were tight. The waitress, after overhearing we had just gotten married, gave us a slice of pie on the house. It was simple. It was imperfect. It was exactly what I wanted. A few days after the wedding, I got a text from my mom, dinner. No expectations. Just come. I stared at it for a while before responding. Okay. When Jordan and I arrived at my parents' house, I braced myself for tension, for lingering resentment, for some last-minute plea to undo everything. But instead, Mom just hugged me tightly and whispered, "I missed you." Dad didn't say much at first, but as we sat down to eat, he finally muttered, "You could have invited us, you know." I raised an eyebrow. "Would you have come?" He grunted. "Probably not." I smirked. "Then what are you complaining about?" Elena snorted into her drink, and for the first time in months, it felt normal. Not perfect, not fixed, but normal. A week after the dinner, Jordan and I finally got a bed frame. As we put it together, which mostly involved me reading the instructions, while Jordan cursed at the screws, I realized something. I didn't regret a single thing. Not leaving, not fighting back, not choosing my own life. It wasn't always easy. It wasn't always pretty, but it was mine. And that was worth everything. Story 2, because she didn't want to give up her weekend. My mom declined to care my ailing child. When I told them I would no longer support them, I lost the opportunity for a promotion and missed a crucial interview to stay with my son. They began requesting payment. They are claiming to be homeless as they stand at the entrance today. My mother's selfishness has always been evident to me. However, I learned yesterday exactly how far she will go. A little backstory. Gregory and I have lived alone since he was 2 years old, and I am a 31-year-old single mother. His father sent birthday cards with $20 inside after moving across the nation in search of a new beginning. Twice a year. On Christmas, once. On Gregory's birthday, once. He remembers sometimes. He doesn't always. I've been employed at the same firm for 4 years, mostly in an administrative capacity that involves bill payment. Gregory has to constantly juggle his asthma medicine, childcare, and rent. I've been working additional hours, taking on unique tasks, and generally doing everything I can to set myself up for a promotion to executive assistant for the last 6 months. A pay increase would result from that. To others, it may not seem like much, but to us, it's the difference between being able to breathe and continuously checking my bank account before going food shopping. After hinting that I was the front runner, my employer, Andrew, ultimately set up my interview for this Friday at 2:00 p.m. Everything was just as I had intended. Gregory would be in school. With the exception of Wednesday nights, I returned to my job around 3:30 after taking a lengthy lunch for the interview. Gregory began to cough, but it wasn't his usual cough. He always has that deep, barking seal cough when his asthma flares up. He had a temperature of 101.3 by Thursday morning, and I knew he couldn't possibly attend school on Friday. Gregory's pediatrician prescribed a steroid and advised him to rest for at least 48 hours after I called in sick on Thursday to take him to the doctor. I contacted my mother as soon as we arrived home. It was here that I made my first error. Given the situation, I figured she would assist my parents in living in the same suburban development they have been in since I was born, around 25 minutes away. My mom is unemployed, and my dad is semi-retired. They normally lead a nice life, going out to dinner 3 times a week and spending weekends at their lake cottage. Although they have never been close to Gregory, they have periodically observed him during real situations. There was a lengthy silence on the phone when I phoned my mother and described the circumstances. "And I wish I was making this up," she added. "We don't have a good weekend, honey. I need to have my hair done and get ready on Friday since your father and I are attending the Williams anniversary celebration on Saturday. These things are like that, you know." I informed her that her only grandchild will have financial security as a result of this advancement. I just asked her to watch Gregory for 2 hours on Friday afternoon, not for the entire weekend. 2 hours? She let out that long, agonizing sigh. All my life, I've heard that she just couldn't alter things last minute, and that perhaps this was an indication that I should reassess my motherly responsibilities. Before I uttered something I would later regret, I hung up. I then phoned the others. Friends, neighbors, and even Gregory's friends came to mind. School parents. However, given the short notice and his illness, no one was able to assist. My boss was in meetings all day, so I attempted to call him to reschedule. I left Isaiah in HR a note outlining my predicament and requesting that the interview be rescheduled on Monday. I received the response on Friday morning. The next week, Andrew had a full schedule, and Juliet from HR emphasized that they had to decide by Tuesday. The interview has to take place on Friday, or else it wouldn't happen. Despite my grief, I responded that I understood and would have to step aside from further consideration. While I tried not to weep, Gregory alternated between resting on the couch and watching cartoons on Friday. Each time I considered the implications for us. At around 4 p.m., my mother texted me on my phone. "How was the interview? Did you manage to make it work?" I looked incredulously at my phone. She seemed to have forgotten all we had discussed, or perhaps she believed that I would miraculously resolve the issue without her assistance. I didn't answer. Another text on Saturday morning. "We're on our way to the Williams celebration. Gregory and you ought to join us for supper tomorrow. Pot roast is what I'm cooking." As though nothing had occurred. As if she hadn't just lost me the chance I've spent months pursuing. Gregory was watching TV on Sunday morning. When I finally gave her a call, I informed her that I was upset by her failure to assist me when I most needed it, and that we would not be joining her for dinner. What did she say? "I'm not going to drop everything for you every time you're in a problem. You are now responsible for parenting Gregory, just as I raised you." From then, the discussion soured. I told her that I'd probably sought for her assistance 5 times in the 4 years after Gregory's father departed. As if gifts compensate for genuine support, she retorted by enumerating all the birthday and Christmas presents they had given him. She disregarded it as something that family members do when I mentioned that I had assisted them several times with things like putting up their smart TV, taking my dad to physical therapy following knee surgery last year, and moving furniture when they redecorated. I was so furious at the conclusion of the talk that I told her I wanted some time alone. They never seemed to have time for Gregory or me, so perhaps it was time for me to stop sacrificing everything to aid them. "You know, we were hoping you could help us with some expenses this month," she replied quietly. "I couldn't believe it when your father's prescription prices increased and the property taxes were due." She was requesting money at the same conversation in which she denied the damage caused by her selfishness. She caused me to miss out on a promotion, which would have cost me money. I informed her that I was unable to provide financial assistance at this time, particularly after missing this chance. She muttered something about the importance of families helping one another. I didn't miss the irony and hung up. I received the formal email on Monday morning. Someone else had been offered the job, and that person had made it to the interview. I sobbed for a good 20 minutes during my lunch break in my car. Then I wiped my face and returned to my work as if nothing had occurred. My dad gave me a call that night. Before clumsily moving on, he began with casual conversation on the weather and some local rumors. "I heard about your chat from your mother. She didn't intend to come across as unsupportive, but they were really depending on me to assist with certain payments this month," he said in an attempt to patch things up. He just said, "These things happen, honey," when I brought up the missed interview. "Other opportunities will present themselves." 3 days have passed. I'm back at my desk, watching the guy who received my promotion learn the ropes, while Gregory is feeling better and returning to school. Inquiring about when I may help with their bills this month, my parents have called twice and texted several times. I'm finished. After receiving one-sided assistance for years, I'm now establishing boundaries. I need them to respect that I texted them to let them know that I won't be able to help in any way, including financially, for the foreseeable future. How did they react? We are related. We are meant to support one another. We are family indeed. However, it seems that only matters when they require my assistance. I have no idea what will happen next. While I feel bad about cutting them off, I also think I should have done this years ago. I'm not sure what to say to Gregory when he continues asking when we're going to see Grandma and Grandpa. In response to those who suggested that I should have brought Gregory to the interview, please note that he was actually quite sick, with a fever and a persistent cough. I couldn't leave him alone, and I couldn't bring a 67-year-old to a formal interview. The initial update. Just over 2 weeks have passed since my previous article. and I wanted to give you all an update since, to be honest, things have taken a direction I didn't anticipate, notwithstanding my parents' history. I want to start by expressing my gratitude to everyone who left a comment on my initial post. I felt less alone and more secure in my choice to establish boundaries after reading your tales and guidance. My parents were silent for precisely 3 days after I texted them to let them know I could no longer provide for them financially. In fact, I began to question if they were acknowledging their actions, or at the very least, honoring my limits. Tuesday night, as I was preparing supper for Gregory and myself, that hope vanished. It was just a box of mac and cheese and hot dogs, his go-to-comfort meal. When I saw the message on my phone, I assumed it was Juliet from next door, who occasionally asks if I need anything from the shop. Rather, it was my mom, who was holding a screen grab of a past due credit card payment for either $60 or $478. No background, not a message, only the screen grab. I didn't answer. Another text 20 minutes later. Our interest rate will increase if we don't get aid by Friday. As I mixed the mac and cheese, I reflected on the many occasions throughout the years. They couldn't afford gifts for Gregory last Christmas, so I helped them out financially. In January, they managed to get a weekend vacation to a ski lodge. Last summer's urgent auto repair ended up being an optional sound system update. Because they had presented it as catastrophic and short-term, I had to delve into my little resources every time. I put my phone aside and concentrated on Gregory and I having supper. All week long, he had inquired about my parents, and I had been evasive, stating that they were occupied. He loves his grandparents despite their shortcomings, and I don't want to bother him with adult issues, even if I detest hiding things from him. He informed me throughout our meal about the solar system project his class was beginning, and how he was chosen to represent Jupiter, which is the largest planet with the greatest number of moons. Mom, I checked my phone once more after he had gone to bed. My dad left 3 unanswered calls and a tense-sounding message. Give us a call back, honey. This is significant. Your mom is really unhappy. I didn't return the call. Rather, I texted to reiterate that, given missing the promotion, I was unable to provide financial assistance at this time. After that, I put my phone on quiet and applied for jobs for an hour. I was still readily replaceable, and the promotion incident had served as a wake-up call after years of devotion to a corporation. I had to take care of myself and Gregory first. My mother sent me a lengthy text message the next morning, stating that the majority of the credit card debt was incurred as a result of her assistance with Gregory and me. I had never heard of this before. As I waited for my coffee to boil, I looked over my personal bank statements from the previous year. Gregory had received a $30 Target gift card for his birthday. At that point, we went out to supper once at Applebee's using a buy one, get one voucher that they had advertised at least 3 times, and I passed along some hand-me-down clothes from my cousin's baby that didn't fit. When their water heater broke, I had given them $800 in the interim. In addition to spending more than $200 in my dad's birthday gift, I devoted numerous hours to assisting them with everything from tech problems to taking them to appointments at night when my dad's cataracts made driving challenging. After dropping Gregory off at school, I went to work and had to teach Rodney some new skills he would need for his new position. My role would be. He kept saying things like, "You really had this down pat, and they should have just waited to interview you," as if he was actually uncomfortable with the situation. It wasn't his fault, but it was awkward. My phone buzzed with an unknown number while I was eating lunch. I replied, assuming it was from one of my job applications. I talked to my mom's sister, Aunt Isla, maybe twice a year during the holidays. She began by expressing her concern for my parents and acknowledging that although I may be going through a difficult emotional period, family must remain united. I discovered that my parents had been phoning family members, portraying themselves as helpless victims who had been deserted by their ungrateful daughter. I attempted to clarify the interview's actual events and the years of biased support. "Well, that's your perspective," she interrupted. "However, according to your mother, she has always supported you." I looked up how to determine whether your parents are manipulative on Google after that call. I read articles over my whole lunch break that seemed to be written, especially regarding my family's dynamics. I was surprised to learn that this wasn't typical and that parents shouldn't make their kids feel like they're always in debt. After crying for 5 minutes in the restroom, I came back to my desk with what I felt was a strong argument. "Smile, I'm all right. Gregory and I were at the playground that night when my dad's SUV arrived. Gregory hurried over with excitement as soon as he saw him. I felt sick to my stomach. This was a confrontation I hadn't planned for, especially with Gregory around. After giving Gregory a hug, my dad asked if he could speak with me. "Take a moment." I turned to my dad and crossed my arms as I sent Gregory back to the swings, where I could still watch him. He appeared worn out, and I briefly experienced the reflexive shame I've carried throughout my life. Then he began to explain that because I've cut them off, my mother has been weeping herself to sleep. Did I also know that the premium for their homeowner's insurance was due the next week? He had traveled 25 minutes to the playground to guilt trip me, but he was unable to make the same trip to assist when Gregory was ill, so I cut him off. He was genuinely shocked, as if he had never made this link before. We spoke with him for around 10 minutes, switching between subtly implying guilt and making outright demands for cash. At last, I informed him that I needed to take Gregory home for supper, and that I would give his words some thought. His face instantly lit up with relief. In his mind, he believed he had won. Thinking about it had always meant that, sure, I would assist, since that was how things had always worked out in the past. Unlike my aunt and I, who usually merely text, my brother Damien phoned over the weekend, which was out of the ordinary. Our folks had given him a hard time. He was able to see through their trickery, unlike her. He informed me that they had done the same nonsense to me the previous year. For what they said was a plumbing issue, I gave them a loan. The next week, I noticed Mom's Facebook post about their new patio furniture. Knowing that I wasn't the only one going through this was vindicating. Going ahead, Damien and I decided to keep each other updated on our parents' financial requirements. I received a message on Monday morning from a firm I applied to, requesting an interview. It was for a job like the one I have today, but with more perks and a higher salary. I gave myself plenty of time to make childcare arrangements by scheduling the interview for the next week, this time with Juliet, who had heard about my parents' predicament and volunteered to help. My mom texted me once more that afternoon. "We are rather dissatisfied with your approach. I have always been there for you, as has your father, and you pay us back in this way. This credit card bill has to be discussed." Although I checked their Facebook page, I didn't reply. Only the weekend before, there were posts that featured them and their buddies at a classy restaurant. According to the message, my mom was feeling amazing in my birthday treat, wearing what appeared to be a brand new outfit. On Tuesday night, I was folding clothes, and Gregory was in bed when there was a knock on the door. Before opening, I made sure everyone was in order because it was almost 9 o'clock. My mother appeared to be both traumatized and outraged at the same time as she stood there. I didn't welcome her inside, but I did open the door. She started talking right away about her responsibilities to her family and how unforeseen costs were causing her and my dad to experience extreme financial difficulties. She mentioned medical expenditures, but she was evasive when I questioned what these costs were. Despite the fact that their home is newer than my apartment complex and the cost of living has increased. Generally, both of my parents are receiving Medicare for home repairs. I maintained my composure and reiterated that I was unable to provide financial assistance at this time. Since I'm skilled at translating budgets, she changed strategies and asked if I could at least assist them in organizing their money. She wanted me to examine their financial condition, feel bad for them, and make a financial offer. I advised them to check into credit counseling services or talk to a financial counselor at their bank. She uttered something that has been echoing in my head ever since her face tightened. "You don't seem to get it. Your folks are where? For 18 years we looked after you. It's your turn to look after us now." I shut the door via the window after telling her I had to see how Gregory was doing. Before she walked back to her car, where my dad was waiting in the passenger seat, I observed her stand there for about a full minute. My mother sent me, Damien, and a few other members of the extended family a group text yesterday that included a link to a GoFundMe page called Help 2 Seniors Stay in Their Home. Medical problems and unforeseen costs were referenced in passing in the description, but nothing specific was provided. The intention was to have no donations at $15,000. Damien phoned me right away, and we both couldn't talk. Our parents are the only owners of their house. Years ago, it was paid off. My dad's pension and Social Security provide them with retirement money. They don't face the threat of homelessness. This was the height of manipulation. The group text has not received a response from me. Damien hasn't either, but my aunt has already sent me a private message inquiring as to why. After everything my parents have done for me, I won't defend them. As I get ready for my job interview the following week, I'm still absorbing everything. I'm out of reasons to explain why we haven't gone to see Grandma and Grandpa. But Gregory continues asking. After years of being taken advantage of, I feel like I'm finally standing up for myself. But I also feel like I'm being cold-hearted. My father sent me an urgent email this morning. Read the topic line, please. The email's content simply said that we must speak in person. It has to do with the house. I'm attempting to maintain my limits, but I have no idea what lies ahead. Next week's employment interview feels like a possible new beginning. A chance to go on without having to keep helping individuals who don't appear to be able to help me when I really need it. After establishing limits with family, has anyone had to cope with increasing demands? For Gregory's sake, any suggestions on how to resolve this without destroying all relationships? Edit. Again, I want to thank everyone for their support. To address a few points raised in the comments, they're not in real risk of losing their house, in my opinion. Regarding Gregory's father, he provides Gregory with the minimum of child support mandated by the court ruling, which hardly covers Gregory's asthma prescription. The second update. 3 weeks have passed since my previous post, and I'm still attempting to come to terms with everything that transpired. I apologize for any errors. I'm doing this on my phone at 1:00 a.m. since I can't sleep. I chose to meet them in a public setting instead of at my apartment after my dad wrote that urgent email regarding the home. Last Saturday morning, I recommended the Starbucks by Gregory's school. I came early, found a table in the corner, and assumed that the public setting would keep things amicable. I could then pick Gregory up from his friends overnight. It was normal for my folks to arrive 15 minutes late. My mother was carrying her Coach purse and sporting her high-end sunglasses. Last year, I assisted her in choosing the one for her birthday. Even though it was cool outside, my dad was wearing his golf shirt. They both didn't appear to be in terrible financial shape. They began chatting over each other about their mortgage company, bothering them over unpaid bills as soon as I sat down. They had repeatedly assured me over the years that their house was paid off, so I broke off to make the point. After a moment of awkward quiet, my mother revealed that they had opened a home equity line of credit 3 years prior. Money seems that they had utilized money to help with expenditures, take an Alaskan trip, and remodel their kitchen. My dad muttered something about not wanting to worry me when I questioned why they hadn't brought this up earlier. As they continued to explain, the reality became evident. The bank was now worried about their payment history since they had been making minimal payments, which mostly covered only the interest. They did not have to deal with foreclosure right away. All they were being required to do was make timely, regular payments. I had a strange mixture of annoyance at the trickery and comfort that they weren't really losing their house. When I inquired about the GoFundMe, 3 people had contributed a total of $175, just in case things got worse. My mother answered, dismissively waving her hand. I reiterated my inability to provide them with financial support, particularly now that I was aware of the true circumstances. I recommended that they discuss the possibility of refinancing or creating a payment plan with a financial expert. My father began to quarrel, but I refused to back down. My dad was solemnly looking into his unfinished coffee as the talk came to a close, and my mom was sniffing into a napkin. Even though I was exhausted, I felt lighter after leaving. Gregory was full of stories about his overnight when I picked him up, and we watched movies and worked on homework for the remainder of the weekend. I made an effort to ignore my parents and concentrate on my impending job interview. Unexpectedly, the interview went well. Although the job was with a smaller firm, it came with greater freedom and better salary. When I discussed my childcare situation to the manager, Douglas, without bringing up the turmoil with my parents, he stated that they have a work-from-home option for parents when kids were sick. He appeared genuinely interested in my experience. It seemed hopeful, but I tried not to become too enthusiastic. Then last Tuesday, our small kitchen table was covered in newspaper and glue, and Gregory was painting papier-mâché as I was preparing dinner and assisting him with his Jupiter project. My Aunt Iola texted me, then my phone rang. It was a screen grab from one of my mother's Facebook posts. Seeing your child make bad choices is perhaps the most difficult aspect of being a parent. I'm praying for direction at this trying time. My mom's cryptic statement about financial difficulties and unappreciative kids was one of many ambiguous, empathetic comments. Below the screenshot, my aunt wrote, "What's going on? Your mother is sharing alarming content." I didn't answer right away. Together, Gregory and I completed his strategy. It did his nighttime ritual and tidied up the kitchen. I wrote a few answers to my aunt after he went to sleep, but I erased them all. How could I write a paragraph that explained years of manipulation and one-sided support? I messaged my brother Damien instead, and he acknowledged that he had seen the posts and had previously criticized our mother in the comments. Within an hour, his comment was suddenly vanished. I finally received the call I'd been looking for on Wednesday night. In order to give me enough notice at my existing employment, Douglas offered me the job with a start date 3 weeks out. In addition to greater benefits and that vital flexibility for Gregory's demands, the compensation was $2,000 higher than what the promotion would have been. I immediately accepted and had a rush of relief. This was the new beginning we required. To celebrate, I brought Gregory to ice cream after picking him up from after-school care. When we were seated at the small table, I received a call from an unidentified number. Something compelled me to respond even though I nearly disregarded it. The management of our apartment building inquired as to whether my parents had permission to access my flat. They had apparently arrived, saying they had to deliver something significant for Gregory, but they had left their key behind. I felt sick to my stomach. They most certainly didn't have permission to enter my place, and I had never given them a key. I informed the management. Not at all. I contacted my folks right away after thanking her for checking. Neither of them responded. I tossed away Gregory's remaining ice cream, hurried him, and then drove home, concerned about their possible activities. As soon as we entered the parking lot, the SUV belonging to my parents was still parked in a visitor space. I instructed Gregory to lock the car's doors and wait inside. I had never done this before, but I vowed to return. As I made my way to the manager's office, I attempted to phone my parents once again, but there was no response. Ariana, the manager, seems relieved to see me. She clarified that my parents had grown more determined to enter my apartment, saying they had left Gregory's medication inside. When she refused without my consent, they sat down in the lobby and promised to wait. They had spent nearly 2 hours there. I braced myself and made my way to the lobby, where my mom's large purse and my dad were seated with a little luggage. When I walked in, they glanced up, and my mother started crying right away. My dad got up and began to explain that their utilities had been turned off because of paperwork problems, and that they had a disagreement with their mortgage company. Even if it was only for a few days until everything was resolved, they needed somewhere to stay. I was stunned as I stood there, presumably to establish themselves before I could protest. They had attempted to force their way into my flat before I arrived home. Why hadn't they phoned first? I asked. According to my dad, they wanted to inform me face to face, since their phones were going to be turned off as well. Nevertheless, rather than merely phoning, they had made the 25-minute journey to my flat and waited for hours. They couldn't remain with me, I informed them. Gregory and I share a single bedroom in our apartment, and the living room has a pull-out couch that is just large enough for one person. More significantly, with everything that had transpired, I didn't feel comfortable letting them remain. I proposed that they stay with my aunt Isola, who lived closer to them and had a guest room, or use the credit card they had just showed me to book a hotel. My mom became angry as she wept. She said that when they most needed me, I was leaving them, exactly as I had said they had done to me. My father began enumerating all the things they had done for me as a child, including buying me clothing, taking me to doctor's visits, and covering the cost of my school meals. Simple parenting duties were disguised as spectacular deeds of kindness. I had to get this over with because Gregory was still waiting in the car. They couldn't remain with me, but I firmly informed them that I would help them find other accommodations. My dad lingered, seeming genuinely perplexed, as if he couldn't understand why I wasn't folding like I always had before, while my mom snatched up her bag and hurried out. My aunt grudgingly consented to let them stay with her for a few days, so I spent the next hour calling her. To my brother, who volunteered to come over and lend a hand if necessary. Lastly, I tried to keep things regular for Gregory, who felt something was off but didn't know what it was, while leaving a message for my parents that included my aunt's address and phone number. My dad texted me the next morning to let me know they were visiting my aunts and would work things out. I showed up for work, gave my notice, and made an effort to concentrate on the improvements that were coming. Gregory wanted to know how Grandma and Grandpa were doing when I picked him up from school. I gave a straightforward explanation. Although they were living with Aunt Isla, they were experiencing some issues with their home. That seemed to satisfy him. I was working on some paperwork at my desk on Friday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a message from the resident portal in my building. Someone had asked to be added to the list of authorized visitors to my residence. My folks. I promptly turned down the request and gave the management a call to clarify that they should never be granted access. After hesitating, Mariana informed me that my mother had been earlier and claimed to have to hand off Gregory's prescription after being told that I had explicitly refused them access. She had started to argue, claiming that she had rights because she was Gregory's grandma. Despite her firmness, Ariana had cautioned me that my mother had discussed returning on Saturday. She knew we would be home today. After thanking her, I diverted myself for the remainder of the workday by mentally rehearsing possible outcomes for when Gregory and I came home. I seldom do this, but I checked our locks twice and closed all the blinds. For Gregory's benefit, I attempted to keep things positive by suggesting that we construct a blanket fort and watch a movie inside of it at approximately 8 o'clock after we ordered pizza for dinner. When we were halfway through, with popcorn strewn all over our fort, here's how to train your dragon. The door was knocked on. I recognized it right away. I positioned myself so the door wouldn't open completely and urged Gregory to continue observing as I responded. My parents were standing there with 2 additional bags and a tiny luggage from earlier. They concluded my place made more sense than my aunt's since I had more space. My dad remarked with a smile as if nothing was wrong. Utterly false, and more in line with their physicians. False as well. Gregory became alert as my mother called out to him, peering beyond me. I informed them up front that they couldn't remain with me as I entered the hallway and partially closed the door behind me. Not right now. Not this weekend. Not just till the situation is resolved. My mother murmured something that made me feel cold, and her expression stiffened. When a daughter turns away her elderly parents who have nowhere to go, we'll see what the cops say. I nearly burst out laughing at the obvious danger. I gently clarified that they weren't homeless or old in any way because they were adults with resources, including a car, at least one working credit card, and family members who were eager to take them in. They would just be sent back to my aunt's house, or to social services if they called the police. My dad changed strategies after failing, as if he realized their menace. He pointed out that next month was Gregory's birthday. Additionally, wouldn't it be depressing if they were living in their car and were unable to attend or provide gifts? I felt ill because the deception was so obvious. I informed them that I would be temporarily barring their phones and that I needed to get back to Gregory. I recommended that they either go back to my aunt or get a motel, using their credit card. After locking the door, I walked back inside and went back to our blanket fort. My hands are trembling a little. Gregory inquired as to whether Grandma and Grandpa would be entering. I informed him that they had to go to Aunt Isla's place, but they had only come over to say hello. After acknowledging this, he returned to the film. However, I remained tense for the remainder of the evening, flinching at every sound coming from the corridor. After knocking twice more, they eventually left. Every time, I looked through the peephole without opening the door. Gregory was sleeping by 10 o'clock at night. Both of them sent me a barrage of SMS, some of which were guilt-tripping. I suppose having been a parent for 30 years is no reason to be upset. When we're gone, you'll regret this. They were officially homeless now, according to strange reports, and I was to blame. None of them got a response from me. Rather, I texted my aunt, who confirmed that they had come back to her house, vehemently protesting my harshness but still agreeing to let me stay in her guest room. My dad sent me an email this morning that included a comprehensive record of all the money they had ever spent on me, from the time I was born until college, along with an estimated amount that he said I owed them. Basic needs like food, clothes, and medical care were among the items, along with emotional labor that had a monetary value. I'm also not answering that. Instead, I helped Gregory with his schoolwork, went to the park with him, and tried to concentrate on our future while working at my new job. However, I'm concerned about their next move. They seem intent on making this my problem, and they have never taken no for an answer before. Edit. A number of individuals have inquired about my temporary stay with a buddy. Unfortunately, with my job schedule and Gregory school, That isn't really an option. It's also our home. I don't want to be forced to leave. To the suggestion that I contact Adult Protective Services, Edit 2. My parents, who are in their early 60s, are resourceful, cognitively capable, and completely mobile. Not because they are weak adults unable of taking care of themselves, but rather as a means of manipulation. I wasn't sure if I would ever publish another update before, but I'm still digesting something that happened yesterday, and writing has always helped me organize my thoughts. I also thought I owed you the last part of the story because so many of you have contacted me to inquire about how things worked out. Just over half a year has passed since that evening. Claiming to be homeless, my parents arrived at my door with suitcases. Since then, a lot has changed, mostly for the better. It's been 5 months since I started my new work. The flexibility that was promised has materialized. Last month, Gregory had an asthma attack, so I worked from home for 3 days without the management making fun of me. I no longer get up at 3 in the morning, but the additional money hasn't made us wealthy by any means. Determining whether I can afford both Gregory, the electric bill, and school supplies. About 7 weeks ago, we relocated in the same school district, but a little apartment with 2 bedrooms. However, Gregory now has a room of his own. You should have seen his expression when we went to IKEA to buy furniture. I also told him that he was free to choose the bedding. One with planets was his choice. The water pressure in the shower lasts more than 5 minutes, and our refrigerator isn't always on the point of breaking. After years of getting by, little indulgences feel like huge sums of money. Regarding my parents, things have been difficult. I didn't get a direct message from them for over 3 weeks after the night they arrived at our house. Rather, they started what my brother Damien refers to as the family public relations effort. My dad's bowling partners, my aunt Isla, and other cousins all reached out to me with varying accounts of their difficult lives and the need for family unity. About a month after my last post, I began going to therapy. It is covered by my new insurance, and to be honest, it has been enlightening. My therapist assisted me in identifying trends. I had been oblivious to the fact that I had been socialized from an early age to feel accountable for my parents' contentment and financial security. In our household, how no was never considered a whole phrase. How my attempts to become independent were always met with the weaponization of shame. I continued the documentation, storing all voicemails, emails, and texts. I had to utilize it in late March. Gregory's school was somehow persuaded by my parents that they had permission to pick him up for a doctor's visit. Thank goodness. I was able to hurry over there once the front desk called to confirm. I addressed my parents, who were waiting in the parking lot. According to my mother, all they wanted was to spend some time with their grandchild following the occurrence. The school administration modified its security procedures after I met with them and showed them the records of persistent harassment. That was the pivotal moment. I informed my parents in a certified letter that they would face legal action if Gregory was seen again without my express consent. I had no desire to do it. I shook my hand when I wrote the letter. But first, Gregory had to be safe. Then they pulled away. All of this has been difficult for Gregory, at least physically. It should come as no surprise that he misses his grandparents and finds it difficult to comprehend why we no longer visit them. I've made an effort to explain without condemning them in ways that are age-appropriate. On the way to school, we've spoken a lot about how it's acceptable to love someone yet require faith from them, and how sometimes the decisions made by those we love aren't the best ones. I'm not sure how much of it he's taking in, but my connection with my brother has really gotten better as a result of everything. I was never really close to Damien. After graduating from college, he relocated across the state and is 5 years older than me. But we have bonded over our parents' actions. Gregory loves his cool uncle, who gives him comic books and teaches him card tricks, and he now comes about once a month. My parents had fallen behind on their mortgage payments, but not because they were poor, as I discovered in April through family rumors. My aunt, who has been unexpectedly sympathetic after seeing the whole picture, claims that they had been putting credit card spending ahead of house payments, believing they could always catch up later. They are no longer at risk of foreclosure after settling on a payment plan with a bank. They were never really homeless. It was straightforward manipulation. In addition, my aunt revealed that my mother had been upset when I obtained the new job rather than providing for them monetarily. It seems that she had been relying on my guilt as a steady source of money, and their financial plans had been disrupted by my sudden backbone. I would be lying if I claimed to have digested all of this with complete emotional clarity. On other nights, after Gregory went to bed, I sobbed and wondered if I was doing the right thing. On some days, I've sent long text messages outlining my viewpoint just to have them removed. Unsent moments. Before recalling our current situation, I thought Mom would adore anything Gregory did. Birthdays and holidays have been the most difficult. Gregory wondered if Grandma and Grandpa would be attending his celebration for his 8th birthday last month. With some of my school pals, I had planned a little party at the neighborhood bowling alley. I informed him that they would not be arriving. For a brief while, his tiny face slumped, but he quickly got back up and began discussing the cake. I was gutted by that moment. Through my aunt, I did give them pictures of Gregory during his celebration. I'm not attempting to deny them access to any information about his life. I'm only establishing limits on direct communication until I can have faith in their conduct. Let's talk about that surprise call. My phone rang with my dad's number yesterday morning when I was preparing pancakes for Gregory, which is our Saturday ritual. Something forced me to answer, even though I almost instinctively declined. In some way, his voice seemed different, quieter, and less entitled. He inquired about our well-being and, for the first time, really waited for my response. Rather than diving into his personal problems, I responded politely but vaguely. Then he said something that caught me off guard. My mother had also begun attending therapy sessions. My mom apparently had a health concern after months of their attempt to reclaim me and my pocketbook going nowhere. Just elevated blood pressure that needed a prescription adjustment, nothing major. However, it led her physician to suggest stress reduction therapy. My dad said she had been going for around 6 weeks. She has been working with her therapist to identify some of her patterns of conduct. He said that she was beginning to realize how her behavior had alienated me. My dad said she was working on certain things and seeing things differently, but there was no big apology or dramatic pledge of change. He just stated that they wanted to progressively reestablish a relationship on whatever conditions I was comfy with. He readily agreed when I informed him that I wanted time to consider it. One more unexpected shift. He said they were working with a financial counselor at their bank and had set up automated mortgage payments before hanging up. He seemed to be attempting to demonstrate that the issues that had caused their homelessness claims were being addressed. Regarding this development, I'm still unsure of what to do. I've learned from my 6 months of treatment to be careful not to fall back into old habits, but I've also come to realize that relationships can change if both people are prepared to put in the effort. It is unclear if my mom's treatment is an authentic kind of introspection or if it is only a means of achieving her goals. I'm taking it day by day for the time being. I've recommended to my dad that we begin with sporadic emails that include pictures, school accomplishments, and other information about Gregory. No money conversations, no in-person meetings, and no unsupervised contact with Gregory at all. Surprisingly, he appears comfortable using these terminology. According to my therapist, real transformation takes time to manifest. Words are simple. What matters are steady deeds over several months or years. I'm thus moving forward with cautious optimism while maintaining my boundaries. Life isn't flawless. The maintenance man is unable to resolve the ongoing dripping sound in the bathroom of our new flat. I'm ignoring the alarming noise my car produced last week because I don't want to find out how much it will cost to fix. Gregory still climbs into my bed at 2 in the morning and occasionally has nightmares. There are office politics and other stressors in my new job, but beneath all of these commonplace difficulties is a fresh sense of purpose. I'm still getting used to the fact that I'm finally in charge of my own life, rather than merely responding to the crises of others. It's frightening, as well as empowering. I have no idea what my parents' future holds. Perhaps they are actually changing. Perhaps this is simply a more complex manipulation. In any case, I will no longer jeopardize her future or the welfare of her kid in order to satisfy their demands. I am grateful to everyone who helped me along the way by offering guidance, anecdotes, and encouragement. Sometimes it's so much better to know you're not alone.